You have 24 hours to clear your things out. My father's voice was cold, detached, like he was firing a contractor who had outlived their usefulness, not evicting his own daughter. I stood in the center of the master suite, the room I had spent the last 3 years restoring by hand. The smell of sawdust and fresh varnish still lingered in the air. My brother River leaned against the doorframe, smirking, his arm draped possessively around his fiancée. "Lorelei, we need the space for the nursery," River said, his tone casual, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. Lorelei nodded, her eyes scanning the room I had built, already mentally redecorating it. "We're moving in immediately. You understand? Right? Zara family comes first." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at them, at the people I had carried on my back for a decade, and felt something inside me quietly snap. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community, to understand why I didn't burn the house down right then and there. You have to understand the house itself. It was a historic estate in Savannah, a crumbling beauty that my parents had bought for the prestige but couldn't afford to maintain. 3 years ago, it was rotting from the inside out. The beams were waterlogged, the wiring was a fire hazard, and the roof leaked every time it rained. My parents, Ryan and Julie, lived in the guest cottage, pretending they were lords of a manor that was slowly collapsing around them. I was the one who stepped in. I'm an interior architect, specializing in historic restoration. I saw the bones of the place, the potential, and I made a deal with them. I would restore the estate, cover the costs, and manage the project. In exchange, I would live in the main house and build my portfolio. It seemed fair. It seemed like a partnership. I spent $320,000 of my own savings on that house. That doesn't include the labor. I spent nights sanding floors until my hands bled. I spent weekends up on scaffolding, repairing plaster molding that had been untouched since the 1920s. I sourced vintage fixtures, negotiated with contractors, and personally oversaw every single detail. I poured myself into that structure because I thought I was building a home. I thought I was earning my place. That's the trap, isn't it? The trap of normalizing cruelty. You grow up believing that love is something you have to buy with labor. You think if you just work hard enough, if you just fix enough problems, if you just make yourself indispensable enough, they will finally see you. You normalize the exploitation because you call it duty or loyalty. I was the fixer, the architect, the one who made things work. River was the influencer. He was 26, charismatic, and entirely useless. He spent his days curating a lifestyle he couldn't afford on social media, posting photos of the estate I was restoring and captioning them, "Family Legacy." My parents ate it up. They loved the image he projected. They loved the idea of being a dynasty. I was just the mechanic keeping the stage lights on. And now, the stage was set. The lights were bright, and the mechanic was being told to leave. River and Lorelei had announced they were pregnant. A royal nursery was needed for the future heir. And apparently, the only room suitable was the master suite I had just finished. My suite. I looked at my father, searching for any sign of hesitation. "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I spent $300,000 on this restoration. I have a contract." He waved his hand dismissively. "That was family money. Zara, you were investing in your inheritance. Besides, you're single. You don't need all this space. River has a family to think about now. Priorities. Priorities." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My priority had been them. Their priority was River. It always had been. I looked at Lorelei, with her designer bag that I knew was a fake, and her smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked at me with pity. "We can give you a few days if you really need it," she offered, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But we really want to get settled before the baby shower." "No," I said. I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded distant. Clinical. 24 hours is fine. I'll be gone by tomorrow. My mother, who had been silent until now, clapped her hands together. Oh. Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. Zara, we can help you pack if you want. I didn't answer. I walked past them, out of the suite, and down the hallway I had refinished by hand. I didn't slam doors. I didn't throw things. I went straight to my temporary office in the library and opened my laptop. If they wanted the house, they could have it. But they weren't getting the architect, and they certainly weren't getting the soul I had put into it. I started packing immediately. But I didn't just pack my clothes and my books. I packed everything that was legally mine. And because I am meticulous, because I am an architect who keeps receipts, I knew exactly what that was. The vintage crystal chandeliers in the ballroom, I bought those at an auction in Paris. Mine. The custom brass fittings in the bathroom, sourced from a foundry in Italy. Mine. The smart home system that controlled the climate and security, paid for with my personal credit card. Mine. The architectural blueprints for the unfinished West Wing. The ones necessary to pass the upcoming city inspection, my intellectual property. Mine. I spent the entire night dismantling the house. I had a team of movers, contacts from my firm who owed me favors, arrive at 3 a.m. We worked in silence. With surgical precision. We took the light fixtures and capped the wires. We removed the high-end appliances I had installed. We took the curtains, the rugs, the custom cabinetry that hadn't been bolted down yet. By sunrise, the house wasn't ruined. I didn't damage a single wall, but it was stripped. It was a shell. It was a beautiful, hollow body with no heart. As I loaded the last box into my truck, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of a heavy chain snapping. The invisible chain of the survivor. You don't realize how heavy it is until it's gone. That desperate need to be useful. To be the savior. To buy your way into their hearts, it was gone. I looked up at the house one last time. It looked majestic from the outside, glowing in the morning light. But inside, it was dark. There were no lights to turn on because I had taken the bulbs. 2. I got in my car and drove down the long driveway. I didn't look back. I blocked their numbers on my phone one by one. Dad, Mom, River, Lorelei. Block, 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 block. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I drove toward the city, toward a small, modern loft I had leased months ago as a backup plan. Just in case. I had never intended to use it. It was small, clinical, empty. But as I walked in and set my keys on the counter, I realized something. It was mine. Nobody could kick me out of it. Nobody could claim it for a nursery. It was safe. The fallout began 3 hours later. I knew it would. I had anticipated it. I sat in my loft, drinking coffee, watching the notifications pile up in my blocked messages folder. I didn't read them yet. I knew what they would say. The panic would start slowly. River would wake up and realize the coffee maker was gone. Then he would try to turn on the lights in the ballroom and find nothing but capped wires. Then the real crisis would hit Adelaide, the HVAC system. I had canceled the maintenance contract and the smart home subscription. The house, old and drafty, would start to feel its age very quickly. I finally opened the folder around noon. 17 voicemails. 43 texts. I started with the texts. River, where's the stuff you can't take the chandelier, Mom Zara? This is petty. Bring back the appliances immediately. Dad, you are stealing from this family. I am calling the police. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Call the police. I whispered to the empty room. I have the receipts. Every single one. Then I saw a video message from Lorelei. She was standing in the master suite, my suite filming herself. She looked furious. This is what we're dealing with. Guys, she said to her imaginary followers. My fiancé's sister literally stripped the house because she's jealous of our baby. Who does that toxic family is real. She panned the camera around the empty room. It looked stark, cold, uninviting. It didn't look like a royal nursery. It looked like an abandoned warehouse. She ended the video with a dramatic sigh. We're going to rise above this. Love wins. I closed the video. Love didn't win. Leverage won. And they had just lost theirs. I opened my laptop and logged into the city's permit portal. I was the registered architect for the estate's renovation. The permits were in my name. With a few clicks, I withdrew my supervision from the project. Without a licensed architect of record, all work had to stop immediately. The city would send an inspector within 48 hours to shut down the site. The nursery renovation river was planning illegal. The unfinished west wing, a code violation waiting to happen. I was just getting started. I pulled up my bank records. For the past 3 years, I had been transferring $8,500 a month into a joint family account to cover household expenses. That transfer was scheduled for tomorrow. I canceled it. Then I called the utility companies. The accounts were in my name. I scheduled a disconnect for the end of the billing cycle. They had 3 days to put the accounts in their own names. But to do that, they would need to pay the deposits. And I knew for a fact my parents didn't have the liquidity. They were asset-rich and cash-poor, living entirely on the illusion of wealth I provided. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text popped up. It was from a contractor I knew. A guy named Mike who handled the heavy structural work. Zara, I'm at the house. Your dad is screaming at me to finish the nursery. But he says you're not paying the bill anymore. What's going on? I texted back. I'm off the project. Mike, do not do any work unless you get paid up front. They have no credit with me. I watched the little typing bubbles appear and disappear. Then got it. Packing up now. I sat back in my chair. The silence in the loft was heavy. But it wasn't lonely. It was the sound of a foundation settling. For years, I had been the pillar holding up a rotting structure. I had taken the weight, the pressure, the decay, and I had called it love. Now, I had stepped away, and gravity was about to do the rest. The next morning, I went to my office. I worked at a prestigious architectural firm downtown, and I had saved up enough leave to take a few days off. But I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be visible. I walked in, head high, dressed in my best suit. My colleagues greeted me, asked about the restoration. I told them the truth. Calm and professional. I've stepped away from the family project to focus on my own work. It's time for the next generation to take over. They nodded. Understanding. In our world, clients fired architects all the time. It was business. Around 2 in the afternoon, the receptionist called my desk. Zara, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says he's your father. He's quite loud. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to remain calm. Send him to conference room B. I said, I'll be there in 5 minutes. I took my time. I printed out a file. I checked my makeup. I walked to the conference room not as a daughter, but as a professional entering a negotiation. My father was pacing when I walked in. He looked disheveled. His shirt wasn't pressed. He looked smaller than I remembered. Zara, he started, his voice trembling with rage. You have to stop this. The city inspector just put a red tag on the front door. They're threatening to condemn the West Wing. I sat down at the head of the table and placed the file in front of me. That happens when you don't have an architect. Dad, I told you. I withdrew. You can hire another one. We can't afford another one, you know that. That's why you were doing it, because your family. I opened the file. It contained copies of every invoice I had paid, every check, every credit card statement. I pushed it across the table. $320,000. I said, that's what I invested. Plus labor, plus management fees I never charged. I was the investor. I was the partner. And you evicted me. You breached the verbal contract. So I liquidated my assets. The fixtures were my assets. He stared at the papers, his face turning red. "You're destroying us," he whispered. "Over a room, over a nursery for your nephew." "No," I said. "Over respect. You chose River. You chose Lorelei. You chose the image of a wealthy family over the daughter who actually paid for it. Now you can pay for it yourself." He slammed his hand on the table. "We don't have the money. Zara Lorelei's trust fund doesn't kick in until she's 30. River is building his brand. We need you to bridge the gap. Just for a few more years." A few more years. The phrase hung there. A few more years of being the ATM. A few more years of living in a construction zone while they played house. "No," I said. "I'm done. Figure it out. Ask Lorelei for a loan. She's an heiress. Isn't she? Surely she can cover a few bills." My father looked away, shifting uncomfortably. Her assets are tied up. Complex investments. You know how it is? I didn't know how it was. Actually, because I paid my bills. But something about his hesitation struck me. Teed up. Complex investments. It sounded like a script. It sounded like something someone would say when they didn't actually have any money. I looked at my father. Really looked at him. He wasn't just angry. He was terrified. And for the first time, I wondered if he knew. Did he know Lorelei was a fraud, or was he being conned just as hard as he was conning me? I decided to find out. I have a friend who works in forensic accounting. Private investigations on the side. I texted him under the table. Need a background check on Lorelei Vance. As soon as possible. I looked back at my father. "I'm not giving you a cent. Dad. Not for the mortgage. Not for the utilities. Not for the architect fees. You wanted the house. It's yours. Good luck." I walked out of the conference room, leaving him staring at the pile of receipts. I felt cold. Hard. Sharp. I felt like a diamond that had been formed under immense pressure and finally cut loose. I went back to my desk and waited. 2 hours later, my phone pinged. It was the investigator. "You're going to want to see this," he wrote. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. Lorelei Vance didn't exist. Her real name was Laura Vanchetti. She had a record. 3 states. Fraud. Larceny. Identity theft. She wasn't an heiress. She was a grifter who targeted families that looked wealthy but were desperate for cash, families exactly like mine. Families who would overlook red flags because they were so hungry for a savior. She wasn't waiting for a trust fund. She was waiting for them to sign something. And then I saw it. The lien. There was a new lien on the house. Recorded 3 weeks ago. A high-interest private loan for $150,000. Co-signed by Ryan and Julie Shaw. And Lorelei Vance. My parents had signed a loan against the equity I had built. They had mortgaged the house to give money to a con artist. I stared at the screen. The shock wasn't just that my family was broke, it was that they were already in debt to a criminal. They had kicked me out to make room for the woman who was draining them dry. And they had financed her with the equity I created. The irony cut deep. I didn't call my father. The old Zara would have rushed in to save him. The new Zara simply saved the PDF, printed a copy, placed it in a manila envelope, and made dinner. 48 hours later, everything collapsed. When I cut the monthly allowance, Laura legally must have sensed the money was gone. Grifters know when the well is empty. She vanished overnight with jewelry, electronics, and everything left in the guest cottage. The next morning, River called non-stop. I ignored it and went to work. That evening, frantic pounding shook my loft door. My father stood there looking hollowed out, the arrogance stripped away. "She's gone," he rasped. "The accounts are empty. There's a loan. I don't remember signing it." I handed him the envelope from my table. "You signed a lien," I said. $150,000. High interest. Private lender. He trembled as he opened it. "How do you know this?" "Because I read what I sign." His face cracked when he saw her mugshot. The criminal record. It should have hurt me. It didn't. We're going to lose the house, he whispered. Then his eyes shifted, calculating. You have savings. Good credit. You can refinance. We can save the estate. No, I said. He blinked. What? No, I won't save the house. We're your family, he shouted. You'd let us end up on the street over a fight. It wasn't a fight. It was an eviction. I said, you bet on River and Lorelei because they looked like status. You bet wrong. He begged. I opened the door. This family is condemned. Get out of my house. Foreclosure came fast. The estate was seized and sold cheaply. My parents ended up in a cramped rental. River moved back in, his online persona collapsing when the mugshot went viral. He now waits tables on the riverfront. I didn't visit. I didn't call. 6 months later, I bought a small carriage house. It needed repairs. But when I signed the deed, my hand was steady. I restored it on weekends, not for approval, but for joy. One afternoon, sunlight streaming in, I looked around and felt peace. My family lived on the illusion that they held me up. They never realized I was the architect holding them up. When I walked away, gravity did the rest. I'm living in a home built on self-respect, and every stroke of paint belongs to me.